Chapter 1. Why people with a dynamic vocabulary are smarter, wealthier, and happier. Words. They're the foundation of nearly everything of value in our world. They have the power to create and the power to destroy, the power to inspire and to terrify, the power to enlighten and also to obscure. Quote, "In the beginning was the Word," end quote. This is the opening sentence of the Gospel of John in the New Testament. Quote, "The Word was with God," the scripture continues, and concludes, "The Word was God," end quote. You can't go any farther than that in acknowledging the power of words. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Chapter 1. Why people with a dynamic vocabulary are smarter, wealthier, and happier. Words. They're the foundation of nearly everything of value in our world. They have the power to create and the power to destroy, the power to inspire and to terrify, the power to enlighten and also to obscure. Quote, "In the beginning was the Word," end quote. This is the opening sentence of the Gospel of John in the New Testament. Quote, "The Word was with God," the scripture continues, and concludes, "The Word was God," end quote. You can't go any farther than that in acknowledging the power of words. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address included only 272 words, yet it helped to unify a divided nation during the Civil War and heralded an end to the cruel practice of slavery. On the other side of the spectrum, the 35,000-word manifesto of the Unabomber provided a glimpse into the evil mind of a murderer and presented its readers with a fearful vision of a technology-driven future. Just about everything human beings have ever created began as an idea whose fulfillment was made possible by a precise selection of words, words of description, words of inspiration, plans expressed in words, dreams expressed in words, and words of triumph or tragedy. A poor choice of words can have a practical effect in building a skyscraper or flying an airplane, just as words can make or break the most important relationships in our lives. Although you may not have given it much thought, your life has been deeply influenced by the words you've spoken or have heard or read. The goal of this audiobook is to make you aware of the power of words and to help you put that power to use in the most important areas of your life. You'll be asked to give this some attention and concentration, but you'll see that the results are very worthwhile. That's because a better vocabulary, a larger and more useful inventory of words, will make you smarter and wealthier in the near future and happier starting right now. If that seems like an overstatement, consider this. Words are the raw material, the building blocks of life's greatest fulfillment, which is our relationship with other people. Executive coach and personal development expert Jim Fannin makes this point brilliantly in his discussion of what he calls, quote, "the 90-second rule," end quote. To illustrate the 90-second rule, Jim uses the example of someone coming home after a hard day at work. What's the first thing people say when they walk in the door and see their spouse or significant other? The temptation is to immediately narrate all the problems, frustrations, distractions, disappointments, and other challenges that took place during the day. Many people aren't even aware of the damage this can do. They just go ahead and unload. Or, if they're a bit more self-aware, they restrain themselves by shutting down. They say they want to unwind. They want to have some, quote, alone time, end quote. Instead of releasing all their troubles on anyone who's there to listen, they choose instead to shut everyone out. With this in mind, Jim Fannin makes a simple but profound suggestion. For the first 90 seconds after you walk in the door, focus 100% on the other person. Make a conscious decision to hear their concerns first. Most importantly, use the power of words to show how glad you are to see them, how much you love them, and how they enhance your life. It's an insightful idea and a very helpful one. But what are the tools you'll need to put the 90-second rule into action? Words are the tools. Words are the means for changing a tense and toxic situation into something very different. Carefully chosen words spoken in a caring way over a mere 90 seconds can bring profound, positive changes to an important relationship. Yes, words are vital to emotional fulfillment, career success, dealing with professionals such as doctors and lawyers, and virtually any other form of human contact. But most people pay almost no attention to the words they use or don't use. Outside of any English courses they took in school or any light reading they may do, most people have little interest and no real training in making their collection of words, their vocabulary, the best it can be. Research shows that most people read less than one book per year, and that statistic is probably changing for the worse as online media becomes more prominent in our lives. The vast majority of the population simply does not continue their vocabulary education past high school. Of those that go to college, means a beginning, they see it as an endpoint. It's the end of learning in the traditional sense of the word, and it's the end forever. I remember a story recounted some years ago by Earl Nightingale, the legendary father of personal development. He talked about a young man who left his college graduation ceremony and yelled to his friends, "I'll never open another book for the rest of my life." Earl said those were the saddest words he'd ever heard. Earl himself wrote and recorded more than 7,000 radio programs during his career. If you've ever heard them, you know that Earl was a master of the English language. What does mastery of the English language really mean? It means having a good vocabulary and knowing how to use it. A dynamic and abundant vocabulary is among the most precious possessions you can ever have. Vocabulary is currency. Each word added is a dollar in your mental wallet. It is your ticket to a creative and fascinating life, a more fulfilling marriage, more positive influence as a parent, reaching your career goals, recognition as a leader in your community, earning more and learning more. Each word used is exercising the mind, the most important muscle. And the best news of all, it takes only 30 days to build a foundation of words that will support success in every important area of your life. That's right, just 30 days. In 1 month's time, you can change people's perception of your intelligence, emotional understanding, and depth. Think of it. For most people, 30 days passes so quickly that they take it for granted. Time slips by without any further investment in their mental growth. Worse than that, they're no better 30 days from now than they were 30 days in the past. 30 days go by and they have nothing to show for it. They have no plan to develop their ability to communicate, or any other skill for that matter. They remain essentially the same person with the same limited communication skills. The reason is obvious. Without a commitment to positive change, how can you grow? While everything else changes, you just stay the same. But here's the deeper irony. You are not the same a month later. Life is a dynamic, ongoing process. Change is always happening, and decline can happen quickly and quietly. As someone once said, you're either growing or you're dying. There's no standing still. Even trying to stand still is risky. Other people in your life, your work, and in your world aren't standing still. Especially in the 21st century, planning to stay the same is really planning to be left behind. The world moves forward. Our careers demand more of us. Our relationships face more barriers to successful communication, and our children are raised in a different universe than we were. We need to grow just to stay influential in their lives. We can lose connections with our own families if we don't continue our education throughout our lives. Consistently refreshing and expanding your vocabulary is the key to staying up to speed and being in touch. You can make the choice either to grow your vocabulary, grow in your ability to communicate, and grow in your ability to influence others, or to be left behind. Keep current or become irrelevant. There really is no third choice. Each day, as technology expands, the universe expands. Your mental landscape must expand with it. And remember, the 30 days you can give to this program are going to pass whether you like it or not. You cannot stop time. Will you use those 30 days to your advantage? Or will you miss that opportunity? Think back to 30 days ago. How different are you today? How different is your ability to communicate? How much bigger is your arsenal of powerful words? Can you communicate with someone in a new and more commanding way? What can happen when you commit to a program that raises your ability to communicate, influence, and inspire up to a whole new level? How could you possibly be worse off after a month if you knew you were going to have brand new knowledge? Are you ready to make that commitment? Can you take action in favor of self-improvement that expands, sharpens, and defines your mind? Will you invest in yourself? Because you have made the critically important decision to purchase this audiobook, I have no doubt that you are ready to make a positive choice. Just by listening to this, you are rethinking the power of words. You are acknowledging that language development precedes intellectual growth. This audiobook contains the arsenal, the toolbox, the precious collection of words to build a vocabulary that is second to none. Each word is a brick, building a solid foundation that cannot be knocked down. You will have a better, stronger base from which to communicate all your ideas. This audiobook also contains the methodology to make those words stick, to make them an intricate part of your daily lexicon. The words will flow effortlessly as breathing. Welcome. I look forward to challenging you to learn not just more words, but even more importantly, the best words necessary to achieve your goals in every important area of your life. Your journey to a new world begins here. As we get started, I'm sure you're asking, who is Dan Strutzel? What makes him an authority? Why should I trust him to teach me such an important subject? I've been fascinated by vocabulary and the use of the English language for my entire lifetime. Growing up with a mom who was a stellar high school honors English teacher certainly had something to do with that, as did my childlike curiosity about learning new things, reading books, and listening to audio programs on any nonfiction topic imaginable, from comedy to personal development to sports biographies and spirituality. Somehow I always knew that words are the window to the world's soul. I continued to nurture that curiosity about learning and language as an English major at the University of Notre Dame, where I studied many of the great books of Western civilization. Each word shapes the great ideas of the past that brought us to this moment in human history. I gained respect for the great authors from the 1700s, 1800s, and early 1900s who drew on a rich and verdant supply of words to convey their thoughts. These authors treated the use of words as an art form, and in view of books written today, I must say this is an art that has largely been lost. My development and appreciation of the use of words could be called my quote-unquote romantic stage in learning and developing vocabulary. I was infatuated with language. I loved the sound of words. I was fascinated with the creative use of language and even liked to dazzle friends and family with words like lugubrious and panoply to show off my education, and perhaps to show my parents that they weren't paying university tuition for nothing. When I graduated and entered the world of adult life and business, I discovered a fact that is critical to the foundation of my approach to vocabulary building. I did not know how to apply my new knowledge. Unless you are a novelist, a journalist, or a poet, the mere acquisition of big and impressive words appears to be of little value. What's the point of fancy new tools if we do not know how to use them? What would be the point of this exercise? After all, how many cocktail parties can you attend to impress others with your priceless locutions? How can you be impressive if most people don't even know what you mean? You're likely to come off as clueless at best and snobbish at worst. You will lose your listeners, and when you lose your listeners, you lose your influence. I quickly discovered that the most important component of vocabulary building is to have a large treasure chest of effective, precise, and powerful words in order to achieve the goals you want to reach in every important area of your life. Each word fits into the puzzle of the problem you are trying to solve. As I came to this realization, I entered the practical phase of vocabulary building. Each word must have a purpose. Each sentence must be concise and structured without padding or filler. The practical phase is where 90% of the value lies in building a dynamic vocabulary. Mere lists of random words are not enough. Anyone can recite a grocery list with a few minutes' time. What good is going through the effort of learning 700 or more new words unless it serves to make your life noticeably better? Rote memorization alone won't win hearts and minds. The late Jim Rohn, best-selling author, speaker, and personal development philosopher, was a mentor in my career. He liked to say that reasons were the key ingredient that made any goal achievable. The why is the key to how a goal becomes achievable. He said that if you had enough reasons to reach a goal, your ability to eventually reach it was virtually guaranteed. That same philosophy applies to the goal of building a dynamic vocabulary. There must be incentives. You need to have enough reasons to achieve your goal. And not just reasons, but compelling reasons. Ones that make you get out of bed in the morning and eagerly take on the daily challenge of building your vocabulary. You will crave adding new words to your lexicon. To my mind, learning new vocabulary words just to impress others or yourself is not a compelling reason to undertake the intensive 30-day experience that is offered in this audiobook. It's not worth the effort. It will simply be too much work. But if I could offer you some practical reasons to undertake this journey, would that create a sufficient incentive? Would that lead you to invest time into enhancing your well-being in a wide variety of experiences? Would you then see how nothing could be more worthwhile than that? That's exactly what I'm going to do. Let me provide a glimpse into what you have to gain. Research shows that men and women who have a larger vocabulary are smarter, wealthier, and happier than the average person in the U.S. It's simple. A bigger vocabulary means a bigger life. Controlling for all other factors, just having a larger vocabulary correlates strongly with three benefits that everyone desires: greater intelligence, greater wealth, and greater happiness than average. You are creating a better world for yourself with every word acquired. In every area of your life, you are creating value, value for yourself and value for others. I've seen these benefits in my work in the publishing industry. As I've mentioned, for over 20 years, I was Vice President of Publishing at the Nightingale Conant Corporation, one of the world's largest publishers of nonfiction, personal development, and skill-building audio programs. Currently, I am the president of Inspire Productions, a company that publishes authors whose desire is to make the world a better place mentally, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. Day by day, expanding what is beautiful in the universe increases our knowledge. Our knowledge then creates more beauty. It's a reinforcing cycle of good. Working with best-selling authors in this field, I have discovered an impressive group of individuals who have amassed a collection of words to convey great inspirational ideas to the public. They are masters at drawing pictures with words. They have no trouble making themselves understood. I have noticed over many years that almost without fail, these individuals possess three distinct attributes. They are gifted thinkers, they are more financially secure than most people, and they derive a great deal of happiness from their positive impact on many lives. They are creating wealth not only for themselves, but for others as well. Being gifted with words, their possession, their expression, and their distribution delivers all of these benefits and more to their lives. The value of their conversation and communication is immediate to the listener or reader. The returns one gets from the gift of words are out of all proportion to the effort that is required to learn them. So how can you afford not to increase the power of your vocabulary? But don't just take my word for it. Here are some current statistics on those who have a larger vocabulary. According to the public policy magazine, City Journal, there is a positive correlation between a student's vocabulary size in grade 12, the likelihood that she will graduate from college, and her future level of income. Why? It's because vocabulary size reflects a whole range of educational achievements and abilities, not just skill in reading, writing, listening, and speaking, but also general knowledge of science, history, and the arts. It's the university library in your head. In addition, there's a solid correlation between vocabulary and practical real-world attainments. For example, many studies have examined the Armed Forces Qualification Test, or AFQT, which the military devised in 1950 as an entrance requirement and a job allocating device. The exam consists of 2 verbal sections on vocabulary size and paragraph comprehension and 2 math sections. The military has determined that the test predicts real-world job performance most accurately when you double the verbal score and add it to the math score. Once you perform that adjustment, a gain of 1 standard deviation on the AFQT raises the subject's projected income by nearly $10,000 annually. These links between vocabulary size and life chances are as firm as any correlations in educational research. Language is education, and education is opportunity. Of course, vocabulary isn't perfectly correlated with knowledge. There are clearly other factors. People with similar vocabulary sizes may vary significantly in their talent and in the depth of their understanding. We each bring different natural talents to the table. Still, there's no better index to accumulated knowledge and general competence than the size of a person's vocabulary. Simply put, knowing more words makes you smarter and wealthier. But between 1962 and the present, a big segment of the American population began knowing fewer words, getting less smart, and becoming demonstrably less able to earn a high income. That's hardly a desired result. This decline in vocabulary has corresponded with a flattening in middle-class wages, which began shortly after the vocabulary decline in the 1970s. In a 2012 Discover magazine post, the author of its Gene Expression blog, Razib Khan, wrote a piece called Higher Vocabulary Correlates to Higher Income. Khan used the statistical correlation between intelligence and vocabulary to show the correlation between vocabulary and income. He found that when ranking one's vocabulary mastery on a scale of 0 to 10, the higher one's vocabulary score, the higher one's income. Those with a score between 0 and 4 earned approximately $26,000 per year on average. Those with a score of 7 earned approximately $48,000 per year, and those with a score of 10 earned approximately $60,000 or more per year. Think of it. Those who doubled their vocabulary score more than doubled their earning potential. Who doesn't want to double their money? Johnson O'Connor, a Harvard-educated engineer, conducted extensive studies on human aptitude and personal achievement. After more than 20 years of evaluating thousands of people of all ages, occupations, educational levels, and backgrounds, O'Connor concluded, quote, "An exact and extensive vocabulary is an important concomitant of success," end quote. Bigger vocabulary, brighter future. Here's another question. What profession scores the highest on vocabulary tests? Which people have the most word power? Authors, doctors, editors, journalists, lawyers, psychologists, scientists, university professors, and writers, right? Certainly those professions require large vocabularies, but the correct answer is none of the above. College professors and professional people do score highly, as we might expect, but the actual winners are corporate CEOs and other top-level business executives. So if you want to climb the ladder of success in the company you work for or are building, mastering vocabulary is a key skill. You are limiting your career ambitions if you avoid such mastery. Why should vocabulary size be related to intelligence and real-world competence? Why should verbal language, the primary way humans communicate, be a measure of real-world success? Though the intricate details of cognitive abilities are under constant study and refinement, it's possible to give a rough answer. We are learning more about human intelligence even if we do not yet understand the finer points. The space where we solve our problems is called working memory. Working memory is the place where we give ourselves the time to untangle everything from crosswords to life's difficult conundrums. For everyone, even geniuses, it is a small space that can hold only a few items in suspension for a few seconds. If you don't make the right connections within that space, you have to start all over again. The entire process must be repeated. One method for solving a problem is to reduce the number of items that have to be dealt with at any given moment. The smaller the size of the information, the easier it is to handle. The psychologist George A. Miller called this process, quote, chunking, end quote, the creation of manageably sized data. Telephone numbers and social security numbers are good examples of chunked information. The number 847-951-5851, written in 3 chunks, is a lot easier to cope with than 847-951-5851, all strung together. Words are fantastically effective chunking devices. Words are limited in appearance, even though they can contain multiple meanings. Suppose you put a single item into your working memory, say, quote, Pasteur, end quote. Louis Pasteur, the 19th century French scientist, most famous for inventing the process of pasteurizing milk, which was named after him. So long as your long-term memory holds a lot of associations with that name, you don't need to dredge them up and try to cram them into your working memory. Each word you know is a file in your mental office. Words create compact chunks of knowledge. The name serves as a brief proxy for what will be needed to cope with your problem. The brief proxy is manageable for problem solving as long as you have access to it. The more readily available such proxies are for you, the better you will be at dealing with various problems. The easier it is to retrieve the file, the faster your problem is solved. Extend this example to whole spheres of knowledge and experience, and you'll realize that a large vocabulary is a powerful coping device that enhances your general cognitive ability. A larger vocabulary is the most efficient way to add speed to your mental computer. So let's get going. Chapter 2. The 5 myths about building a dynamic vocabulary and the truths you will learn in this 30-day program. As we start our journey toward building a dynamic vocabulary, I want to emphasize what makes this vocabulary program unique. Why is this program the one that will make you smarter, wealthier, and happier? After all, there are many vocabulary audiobooks on the market. In fact, there are so many that people can easily overlook the building of vocabulary as a gimmick. Why do I believe that this is the one audiobook that is worthy of your investment? Why should you financially invest in something that seems like an elementary task, which is exactly how learning about words seems to many people? Most importantly, why is this audiobook worthy not only of your money, but your time? Why should you sacrifice the most valuable of commodities? As my friend, the late Jim Rohn, used to say, quote, time is more important than money, end quote. Why? You can get more money, but you can't get more time. When you invest a day in a project, you have one less day to spend. So if you're going to invest a day, you darn better well have something important to show for it. Time can't be withdrawn from an ATM machine. Let me tell you why I believe that I have something important enough for you to spend your time on. important enough to invest your time right now in order to enhance your future. Because that's what building your vocabulary will do. As I noted earlier, this audiobook will not just teach you words to help you to impress others or look sophisticated. This program outlined here has a higher purpose. Your time is too important for that. It cannot be wasted on mere cocktail party banter. This audiobook will teach you effective, practical words to help you achieve measurable results in 12 specific areas of life: wealth and finance, persuading others, creating positive relationships, becoming an effective and loving parent, discussing politics and history, understanding the natural world, becoming a compelling conversationalist, exploring religion and spirituality, learning about diet, nutrition, and health, examining the vocabulary of cosmology and the universe, learning the rapidly changing vocabulary of high technology, and seeing how wisdom has been expressed in words throughout the ages. And now, in this all-new second edition, I will also add 120 additional new words which are newly developing in the 2020s and likely to be used far into the future for you to incorporate into your vocabulary as well. Your world is about to expand. At the end of this 30-day program, you'll not only have the building blocks for a greater vocabulary, but for a greater life. This audiobook will help you to achieve your goal of building a more dynamic vocabulary of more than 700 words in just 30 days. A significant increase in knowledge is yours 1 month from today. 30 days from now, you can have a measurably better vocabulary, measured not only by the number of words you know, but by mastery of those words in the audiobook's 12 topic areas. Research has shown that it takes between 21 and 30 days of rehearsal and development of any skill to make it a habit, a part of your life. This is a relatively short amount of time for making a life-changing transformation. Suppose you are beginning a new workout routine after years of inactivity. You have grown accustomed to later wake-up calls and the comforts of your office chair. You decide to get up at 6 a.m. and arrive at the gym by 6:30 so you can get a 45-minute workout and still be in the office by 8. The first day of your new routine will seem like drudgery. It will be difficult to get out of bed. You'll find every possible excuse to give yourself a break and start your program a different day. And even if you do make it to the gym, your body will feel uncomfortable, exhausted, and tight, perhaps even stiff and a bit weak. This is why so many people give up new exercise goals. Health clubs rake in profits on, quote, New Year's resolution members, end quote, because few of those resolutions are ever followed through. Most people cannot complete even the first month of a new routine. Most people do not know that if they can power themselves through the initially uncomfortable period, their routine will seem as effortless and natural as brushing their teeth or driving to work. It becomes automatic. It becomes normal for you. What once felt unnatural will feel as if you'd always done it that way. This is the great secret that all successful people know. It's the key to permanent life change. This program has been designed to fit the 30-day model, a time frame on the far end of what's required to establish a new reflex, a habit that becomes part of you. All you have to do is follow this program exactly as we've laid it out. It is designed so that you can just dive in and begin. After 30 days, we guarantee that you will have established a habit that will be easy for you to continue for the rest of your life. Ludwig Wittgenstein, one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century, was a lifelong student of the importance of words. He compared words to the tools of a carpenter beginning to build a house. The number and power of the tools you have determine the kind of house you are going to be able to build. Can you make your world bigger, brighter, and bolder with a list of words? Could it be that just by expanding your vocabulary, you can expand the entire experience of your life? Can a bigger vocabulary make each day a more colorful journey? Yes, absolutely. A person with a small vocabulary is like someone who lives in a confined space, say a 20 by 20 room, for their entire life. While the space may be furnished and comfortable, their potential for growth, for expanding their awareness, for increasing their freedom, is inevitably limited. There is no way to penetrate the walls. But a person with a large, dynamic vocabulary is like a traveler who experiences a wide variety of cultures, languages, and lifestyles. That vocabulary is a passport to wherever you want to go. Every day is new. Every moment is enriched. An expanded vocabulary means expanding beyond boundaries. Once you embrace the joy of words, it becomes limitless. The novelist Jodi Picoult has said that, quote, "Words are like eggs dropped from great heights. You can no more call them back than ignore the mess they leave when they fall." End quote. Words can be like feathers, or they can be like hammers. We must be sensitive in the choice of our words. Expanding your vocabulary enables you to choose words with great precision so as not to drop eggs that leave a mess where you didn't intend. A deft touch is required when we select each word. How many people leave a mess of eggs everywhere they go, especially when discussing politics, religion, or other deeply held beliefs? They invite offense without even realizing it. This program will give you a supply of words so that you can deliver the right word with the precision of a fine surgeon. As Socrates said thousands of years ago, quote, "The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms," end quote. How can we know what we are talking about if we don't know what we mean? There are scores of people out there who not only have small and ineffective vocabularies, but who frequently misuse the words they do know, or worse, misuse words they think they know, but actually don't. Many people create confusion simply by not thinking through their choice of language. Developing a greater vocabulary not only gives you a greater number of words from which to choose, but makes you intimately familiar with a word's precise meaning, along with its synonyms, antonyms, and additional meanings. Each word will become a multi-purpose tool. You will soon discover that expanding your vocabulary yields exponential results. It is an excellent investment. If you learn 700 words, in reality you will be learning 2 to 3 times as much. Before we can proceed with the vocabulary sessions and to look at the words themselves, we need to dispel some of the myths about building and maintaining a dynamic vocabulary. We will also present a few key hints that will make building your vocabulary a lot more efficient and a lot more fun. This is critically important because we're going to present a huge amount of information in this audiobook. You'll need to stay motivated and avoid the most common misconceptions, or rather myths, about building vocabulary. Here are 5 of them. First, there's the myth that really learning a word requires a certain number of exposures in your everyday life, that you cannot learn words by studying the dictionary or listening to an audiobook like this. If that were true, very few people in the world would have a highly developed vocabulary. That's because the words we encounter every day are only a tiny fraction of the words that are actually in the language. Here's a second myth, that a good vocabulary can be measured by the sheer number of words you know. The truth is, the number of words you know by their definitions has to be factored against the number of words you actually know how to use. Using them takes practice. Learning definitions is only the first step. Myth number 3. You can usually guess the meaning of a word from the context in which it's used. That's a common but completely incorrect assumption. Suppose I say, his knowledge is very esoteric, versus his knowledge is very eclectic. There's really no way to tell the difference between the meaning of those two sentences. But if you were in a conversation with someone who expected you to know the difference, not knowing could be embarrassing. Myth number 4. Learning vocabulary requires a detailed explanation of every new word. While words can have subtle shades of meaning, it's not practical to explore all those variations in a vocabulary program. Research shows that simple word lists or brief summaries of a word's meaning are an effective and efficient way to learn. That's the format we'll be using throughout this audiobook. Myth number 5. It doesn't really matter how words are presented in a vocabulary program. The relationship between the words has no effect on whether they're harder or easier to learn. Actually, just the opposite is true. For most efficient learning, words should be arranged in thematic sets. That's why we've organized these chapters around specific applications of words, like financial vocabulary or words that are important for persuasion. Now let's look at the bright side. Here are some tips to keep in mind as you go through the audiobook. First, feel free to start with any of the 12 vocabulary building sessions. The sessions are organized by theme rather than chronology. There's no first or last vocabulary session, so try to formulate your own strategy. You may want to listen to one session several times, or you can go through one after the other in succession. Learning is a very individual and personal activity, and there's no single best strategy. Good vocabulary learners use a wide variety of learning strategies. You should develop one that works best for your needs and your learning style. Here's a second hint. Read as much as you can. Read anything and everything. What you read is much less important than how much you read. Although some reading materials will teach you more than others, the purpose of reading widely is to make reading a deeply ingrained habit. If you read enough, you'll see important vocabulary words used in context, and that's the best way to learn words for the long term. Studies have consistently shown that strong readers are highly correlated with vocabulary depth. The more words you are exposed to, and the more ways you see them used, the better vocabulary you will have. The majority of new words are learned from context. To improve your context skills, watch how words are actually used. While you read, pay close attention to any words we discuss in this audiobook. See how those words are actually put to work. Also, give special attention to words you don't know or that you've never seen before. Try to figure out their meanings from context, but don't stop there. Look up all the words you're really unfamiliar with. Read anything and everything, but also challenge yourself to read difficult material so that you'll be encountering lots of new words. Next, practice, practice, and practice some more. Make a determined effort to use the words you're learning. Vocabulary is not just an academic discipline. English is not a dead language like Latin. English words aren't just for study, they're for us. Learning the definition of a word alone won't prevent you from forgetting it. You will forget a word if you don't use it. Research has proven that 10 to 20 repetitions are needed to really make a word part of your vocabulary. It also helps to write words down or type them out. Even if you feel very confident that you know certain words, writing them on index cards or using a flashcard app, I recommend Anki, A-N-K-I, Quizlet, or Brainscape, can be an effective strategy. Write or type the definition of the word and also a sentence that shows how the word is used. Some words can be used as both nouns and verbs, so make up examples of both uses. And remember, as soon as you learn a new word, start using it. Review your cards to make sure you're using the words you've learned and to see if you've forgotten how any of them are used. The next tip may sound surprising, but it's extremely effective. Say the word out loud. Make up sentences using the word and say them when you're by yourself. Make up as many associations and connections for the word as you can. Try to relate the word to other words you already know. For example, the word humongous has a similar meaning to gigantic or huge. You could create a sequence of words to help you remember the new one. Small, medium, large, very large, and then humongous. Make a mental list of things that could be considered humongous. Create an imaginary image for the word that dramatizes its meaning, like, quote, "The hot dogs were humongous, but I ate 4 of them anyway," end quote. Making up vivid sentences like that is a form of mnemonics or memory trick. For example, the late Zig Ziglar, a great speaker and sales trainer, used to joke about the word assume. He used to say that it is always dangerous to assume anything because it can, quote, "make an ass out of you and me," end quote. Once you start thinking about it, it's amazing how many of these mnemonic tricks you can come up with. Along the same lines, have fun with words. Play games like Scrabble and Boggle. Do crossword puzzles. You can even do word puzzles on your smartphone. Taking tests can challenge your knowledge of words and help you see your progress in your vocabulary. Books of practice SAT tests are especially good. One final tip. This may seem almost too obvious, but it's really not. In fact, it may be the most important thing you can do for building your vocabulary. Here it is. Look up words in the dictionary. But not just any dictionary. I strongly recommend that you buy a paperback dictionary you can carry around with you. That doesn't mean you have to pull out your dictionary the instant you hear a new word, but you should have the means to look up the word as soon as it's convenient. I also strongly suggest that you use a physical, hard copy dictionary. Connecting with a dictionary on your smartphone won't serve the same purpose. For one thing, physically looking up a word requires more focused attention than pushing a few smartphone buttons. Moreover, as you're looking up one word, you're bound to encounter some other words you might not know. That said, since I published the first edition of this audiobook, I had readers and listeners tell me that they simply won't use a hard copy dictionary. So if I cannot convince you, I'd rather that you use some tool than none at all. And I don't want you to think I'm a Luddite. So for my readers and listeners who will only regularly carry their smartphone and prefer to review items from an app, I recommend the apps from dictionary.com, vocabulary.com, or the New York Times Word of the Day. Many of the words you'll encounter in this audiobook may be entirely new to you. Others may seem familiar, but are really new because they're being used in an entirely different way than you've seen them before. Keep your eyes open and keep your mind open. You'll be glad you did. The 30-Day Program. My promise to you, as described in the title of this audiobook, is to enable you to add over 700 words to your own vocabulary, available for your daily use within 30 days. This is an ambitious goal, but you can achieve it if you commit to implementing the following process. Simply review all of the words that you are learning on a daily basis. You will notice that each chapter suggests the specific days in the 30-day program to focus on those words. I suggest that you program the specific chapter and its corresponding days into the digital calendar on your smartphone or your computer and set it to remind you to review the words from that chapter on each of those days. Now, for the audio version of this book, since you will not have the book in front of you to review the words, I will be doing unique bonus review sessions for the vocabulary words you learn from each chapter after the conclusion of the main text of this audiobook. On each particular day during the 30-day program, go to the contents listing on this audiobook and select the specific bonus review session that corresponds to the topic of a particular chapter. For example, money and finance, parenting, health and nutrition, etc. I will then lead you through each review session using super learning principles, gently leading you into a meditative alpha state as we begin the review, to install the vocabulary words at a deeper level. Please listen to these review sessions at a place where you can give them your full attention and are not driving, doing other tasks, or likely to be interrupted. I suggest that you listen to these bonus audio review sessions on their particular day once within 5 minutes of waking up in the morning and once within 5 minutes before going to sleep at night. Why do I suggest these specific times? Because research shows that your subconscious mind, the part of your mind that operates your bodily functions without your conscious thought, and which stores all of your long-term memories for retrieval at a moment's notice, is most receptive to suggestion just after waking and just before drifting off to sleep. If you keep this audiobook by your bedside and review these words, speaking them out loud and listening to them in the bonus audio review sessions, along with their definition, at least twice a day as I've suggested, on the suggested schedule, after 30 days, you will have made these new vocabulary words a permanent part of your way of thinking, writing, and speaking. Since you'll be implementing this program just after waking up and just before falling to sleep, it will have little to no impact on your daily schedule. So why not take the next 30 days to see what amazing things you can accomplish? My hope is that this practice will be so valuable that you will continue it well beyond 30 days. So let's get started. Chapter 3. Days 1, 2, and 3. The words you need to know about money and finance. Welcome to the first of our 12 vocabulary building chapters. In this lesson, we'll be looking at words related to money and finance. These are important because even though money may not make the world go round, it has a definite impact on our lives every day. As will be true in most of this audiobook, not every word you find here is being presented because it is unusual. In fact, many of the words will be familiar to you in their everyday usages, but when they exist in a unique context, which in this lesson is finance, they take on a new meaning. In effect, they become new words. As in all chapters, I have introduced 10 unique words for this second edition that are newly emerging in the 2020s and likely to be even more relevant in the future. As I stated in the introduction, these new words may not be part of your everyday usage yet. Thus, they will also be presented as part of a short story at the end of each chapter, so their usage soon becomes more familiar. Our purpose is not to create an unusual novelty list of esoteric words. Instead, we want to explain the exact meaning of seemingly familiar words in a specific area, along with some words that will probably be new to you and don't have application in a wider subject area. Throughout this audiobook, when I come to a specific vocabulary word, I will give it a slightly longer and harder emphasis. So, since you do not have the book in front of you, you know that this is the particular word that we want you to assimilate as part of this vocabulary program. So let's get started. Just like other important concepts, money is difficult to define, even though it plays an important part in our lives every day. Here's a definition of money that might be as good as any. Money is any circulating, quantifiable, and symbolic medium of exchange. That definition includes 3 specific attributes of money. So let's take a look at them one by one. First, money is a circulating means of exchange. It can be passed without much difficulty between one person and another, or it can be shipped from one place to another. A piece of land is not money. The value of a piece of land, expressed in money, can circulate between people, but not the land itself. Second, money is quantifiable. That's what makes it possible to circulate. If pennies were the only denomination of money that we had, we'd have a hard time even paying for a package of gum, which now costs about 125 pennies. Fortunately, different quantities of money can be expressed by bills or coins of the same size. A $100 bill is no bigger than a $1 bill. The quantity that one represents is 100 times larger than the other, but the size of the bill is the same. The last quality of money is the most interesting and is really its most basic characteristic. Money is symbolic. As a purely physical object, money has next to no value. It's a scrap of paper or a piece of metal. But its symbolic value is practically infinite. Money can symbolize anything and everything, or at least part of anything and everything. And it can symbolize all those things at once. A dollar bill can represent part of the cost of a hospital or an atomic bomb. It can be a gift from the tooth fairy, or it can be part of a drug deal. In the end, money is both tangible and mystical. It may be the most important of all humanity's creations, and it's certainly the most imaginative. The word riches is an easy one to define. Riches means having a lot of money or having a lot of the things that money can buy. A person's riches are easy to recognize and document. You can see them in a big house, an expensive car, or big numbers on a bank statement. It's usually fairly easy to tell if someone is rich. People tend to express their wealth in a fairly public way. That doesn't mean that all rich people are extravagant, but you don't often find them sleeping on park benches. People can also go from poor to rich or rich to poor very quickly. You can win the lottery or lose your winning ticket. You can also find it again. Wealth can include riches, but wealth is also a larger concept. It is a sense of abundance that riches can help to bring about, but it transcends riches. When we speak of wealth building, we mean not just acquiring a lot of money, but also having the consciousness capacity to use the money wisely. Strange as it may seem, money is a building block of true wealth, but it's not the foundation. That foundation includes many other things, such as a large vocabulary. Capital refers to any financial resources that are available for use. Countries, corporations, and people are better off financially when they have more capital rather than less. We could say the same thing about money, but capital is different from money in a financial vocabulary. Money is used simply to purchase goods or services for use or consumption. Capital is a more flexible and abstract term. It can refer to anything that has the potential to generate wealth through investment. It can include cars and trucks, patents, computer software, or brand names. All of these things are potential tools for creating more capital and eventually wealth. Income is money that a person or a business receives in exchange for providing goods or services or by investing capital. Income is used to pay for day-to-day expenses, and if there's anything left over, that surplus income can be invested. For purposes of taxation, the U.S. government defines income as any and all money that came into your possession during a specific period of time. Even if you obtained the money illegally, it's considered income by the government, and you're supposed to pay taxes on it. In businesses, income means a company's remaining revenues after all expenses and taxes have been paid. But a business's income is usually referred to as earnings. Interest is a fee that is charged for the privilege of borrowing money, typically expressed as an annual percentage rate. Lenders make money from interest, and borrowers pay it. Today, it's understood that anyone who borrows money in a formal loan will agree to pay a certain amount of interest, but that wasn't always true. Although the concept of interest has existed for thousands of years, for many centuries, it was prohibited to charge or earn interest on borrowed money. Interest was even considered sinful. In that context, it was known as usury. Profit is a financial benefit that is realized when the amount of revenue gained from a business activity exceeds the expenses, costs, and taxes needed to sustain the activity. Any profit that is gained goes to the business's owners, who may or may not decide to spend it on the business. Profit is the goal of any business, and a business can't survive unless a profit is made. But it's also possible to have too much profit, because it can lead to increased tax liabilities. A well-run business will reinvest a significant amount of profit in the business itself in order to control what needs to be paid in taxes. Companies can also have profit-sharing plans with employees. Return on investment is usually referred to as ROI. This is a measure of performance used to evaluate the efficiency of an investment or to compare the efficiency of a number of different investments. Basically, It compares what gets put into an enterprise with what's gotten out of it. If you put more into something than you get out, the ROI is unsatisfactory and eventually unsustainable. In financial terms, ROI can be calculated by dividing the returns on an investment by the investment's cost. But ROI has also become a very widely used term that isn't limited to money. For example, if a manager has to spend lots of time giving instructions to a new employee, but the employee still doesn't produce good work, then the manager's return on the investment of time is not good. Debt is an amount of money borrowed by one party from another with the expectation that the borrowed amount will at some time be paid back. Companies can take on debt just like individuals. So can nations. They can even go into debt to themselves, as the United States has done. But debt is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, many businesses couldn't survive without it. Companies use debt to finance large purchases that they couldn't afford otherwise. The terms of a debt define the conditions under which the borrowed money will be paid back at a later date, usually with interest. Any company or individual who owes money is in debt and is known as a debtor. If the debt is in the form of a loan from a financial institution, the debtor is referred to as a borrower. If the debt is in the form of a security, like a bond, the debtor is referred to as an issuer. The bond is a financial instrument that has been issued to a lender. It is the vehicle through which the loan was made. Historically, failure to pay a debt was considered a crime. There were prisons in which debtors had to remain until the debt was paid. There were many problems with this system. For one thing, if you were in prison, you couldn't earn any money to pay your debt. Debtors' prisons were found in the United States up to the middle of the 19th century. Virginia was the last state to abolish them in 1849. In the United States today, it's not a crime to fail to pay a debt, but it's still not a good idea if you can avoid it. For one thing, if you don't pay the debts you already have, it's not going to be possible to find anyone who will lend you money in the future. You won't be able to obtain credit. Credit is the borrowing capacity of an individual or a company. It's a form of contract under which a borrower receives something of value now and agrees to repay the lender at some date in the future, generally with interest. A contract is created to define the terms under which one party becomes a debtor and the other becomes a lender, also called a creditor. Credit can also refer to the amount of money available to be borrowed by an individual or a company, which must be paid back to the creditor at some point in the future. If you make a purchase at the mall with your Visa card, this is a credit transaction. You are borrowing money to buy something now with the understanding that you'll need to repay that money later, plus interest. The longer it takes for you to make that repayment, the more interest you will need to pay. Credit score is a term that's become very important in recent years. It has become a part of people's identity in the modern world, like a driver's license or a social security number. Your credit score is a statistically derived number generated by three major rating industries that expresses the likelihood that you will repay your debts in terms of your past reliability. It's a number between 300 and 850. The higher the number, the more creditworthy you're considered to be. That number is mostly based on your past credit history, but it's also influenced by what you are doing right now. Your credit score is always in flux, always going up or down. A credit score is a major factor in a lender's decision to extend credit and what the terms of that credit are going to be. For example, borrowers with a credit score under 600 won't be able to receive a prime mortgage and will need to go to a subprime lender for a subprime mortgage. That kind of mortgage will typically have a higher interest rate. As with debtors' prisons, there's something contradictory about this concept. How can you pay your debt if you can't get out of prison to earn any money? Why should someone who hasn't been able to pay their debts in the past be charged even higher interest now? But money has its own kind of logic. A salary is a fixed amount of money paid by an employer to an employee. Salaries are paid periodically, usually at regular intervals, in exchange for work or services. A salary has three basic qualities. First, it's money. Second, it's connected to a specific time frame. A salary can be paid weekly or monthly or even yearly, but the worker should know when it is coming and the employer should know when it needs to be paid. Third, the salary is understood by both parties to be in exchange for certain specific activities. Salaries are paid for what you do, not for who or what you are. Two people can be paid exactly the same salary, provided they've been hired to do exactly the same job, even though they might be different in every other respect. Salaries differ from wages in that salary entails a fixed amount paid over a given period, regardless of hours worked, although a minimum number of hours is stated or assumed. Wages, by contrast, are paid usually on an hourly basis. Someone who is being paid at a rate of $40 an hour is receiving a wage. Someone who is being paid $100,000 a year is receiving a salary. Compensation can include other forms of payment besides money. Part of an executive's compensation might be the use of the fitness center in the corporate headquarters, flights on the company plane, or stock options on the company's shares. As you go higher up in the organization, you move away from the time for money trade-off, a salary, and toward other kinds of compensation. This is an important distinction because as long as you are trading time for money, there is a limit on how much you can make. There are only so many hours in a day, after all. Compensation doesn't have that kind of limit, and many companies are very imaginative about the forms it can take. Accounts payable are the vendors to whom a company owes money beyond the company's fixed cost operating expenses, like payroll or rent. When people speak of accounts payable, they usually mean money owed from the purchase of products or services. The actual amount of accounts payable can vary with the terms of the purchase and are often connected to the time frame in which payments are made. So the cost of an account that's paid promptly, for example, can be lower than for one that is not paid within 30 or 90 days, in which case it can accrue additional interest. Accounts receivable, or receivables, refers to any money owed to your company by customers, clients, or other companies as payment for goods or services that you have delivered but have not yet been paid for. These receivables can take the form of lines of credit that can be due in short or longer periods of time, from a few days to a year. Accounts receivable are not limited to businesses. Individuals can have them as well. Even paychecks can be defined as receivables. They represent money that is legally owed for work that has already been performed. Amortization is paying off debt through a fixed repayment schedule in regular installments over a predetermined period of time. Most people participate in amortization through home mortgages or car loans. A typical mortgage can extend over 30 years. A car loan can extend over as much as 5 to 7 years. With car or home loan payments, most of the monthly money at the beginning of the term goes toward interest. With each subsequent payment, a greater percentage goes toward principal. At the end of the term, all principal and all interest will be repaid. An asset is a resource with economic value that an individual, a corporation, or a country owns or controls with the belief that it will provide future benefit. If a company owns seacoast land that is suitable for development, this is an asset whose value can be assessed in several different ways. There is the price that was paid for the land, the price it could bring if it were sold today, and the price it could bring if it were sold after development has been completed. Any physical property or machinery that a company owns also constitutes assets. So does intellectual property, which refers to creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs, and symbols, names, and images used in commerce. In high-tech industries, intellectual property may be much more valuable than brick-and-mortar assets like buildings. Bankruptcy is a legal process involving a person or business that is unable to repay outstanding debts. The process begins with a petition filed by the debtor identifying the creditors and the money owed to each of them. The court then evaluates the debtor's assets, and all or part of them are used to repay a portion of outstanding debt. Upon the successful completion of bankruptcy proceedings, the debtor is relieved of the debt obligations incurred prior to filing for bankruptcy. Bankruptcy offers an individual or business a chance to start fresh by forgiving debts that can't be repaid. It also lets creditors get some repayment based on the assets that actually are available. The ability to file for bankruptcy can benefit the economy as a whole. It gives indebted individuals and businesses another chance, and providing creditors with realistic debt repayment. A bond is a piece of paper, a so-called debt investment, through which an investor loans money to an entity such as a corporation or a government. The value of the bond is borrowed for a defined period of time at a fixed interest rate. Bonds are issued by companies, cities, states, and nations to finance many different projects and activities. The issuer of the bond states the interest rate that will be paid periodically over the life of the bond. The issuer also states when the loaned funds, the principal, will be returned. The date of that return is called the bond's maturity date. A broker is an individual or a firm that is licensed to execute, buy, and sell orders from investors in assets such as stocks, bonds, or commodities, and charges fees or commissions for those services. At one time, the number of people who could invest in stocks and bonds was limited by the cost of brokers' fees. But the Internet has opened the door to discount brokers and has even made it possible for people to invest with no broker at all. This has hugely enlarged the number of people who can afford to invest in the market. A certificate of deposit is also known as a CD. It's a savings certificate entitling the bearer to receive interest. A CD bears a maturity date and a specified fixed interest rate and can be used in any denomination. CDs are generally issued by commercial banks and are insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC, an independent government agency that will ensure repayment of assets in situations such as a bank failure. The term of a CD generally ranges from 1 month to 5 years. A certificate of deposit is a promissory note issued by a bank. It is a time deposit that restricts holders from withdrawing funds on demand. Although it is still possible to withdraw the money, this action will often incur a penalty. A deficit is the amount by which expenses exceed income or costs outstrip revenues. Deficit essentially refers to the difference between cash inflows and outflows. It is generally prefixed by another term to refer to a specific situation, trade deficit or budget deficit, for example. Deficit is the opposite of surplus and is synonymous with shortfall or loss. Large and growing deficits over prolonged periods of time are unsustainable in most cases, whether they are incurred by an individual, a corporation, or a government. Huge deficits over a number of years can wipe out equity, which we'll soon discuss, for an individual or a company's shareholders, eventually leaving bankruptcy as the only option. Although sovereign governments have a much greater capacity to sustain deficits, negative effects in such cases include lower economic growth rates in case of budget deficits, or a plunge in the value of the nation's currency in case of trade deficits. Depreciation is a tax and accounting method for allocating the cost of a physical asset over the course of its useful life. It is a measure of how much of an asset's value has been used up as time goes on. A dividend is a payment of a portion of a company's earnings to the company's shareholder, as decided by the board of directors. Dividends are usually expressed on the basis of shares, which means the dollar amount each share receives. Dividends can be paid in the form of cash or stock. Most profitable companies offer dividends to their stockholders. The company's share prices might not move up, but the dividends provide value to the shareholders. A nation's economy includes everything related to the production and consumption of goods and services in that country. The study of the economy and the factors affecting its growth is the basis for the field of economics. Entrepreneurs are individuals who, rather than working as employees, start their own businesses and assume all the risk and rewards. Entrepreneurs play a key role in any economy and have sometimes created whole industries on their own. Steve Jobs and Bill Gates are good examples. The rewards for an entrepreneur's risks are the potential profits the entrepreneur can earn. Equity refers to stock or any other form of ownership interest in an asset after all debts associated with that asset are paid off. For example, if a house has no unpaid debt, the owner's equity interest is 100%. If the house has a mortgage for 50% of its value, the bank has 50% equity and the homeowner has the other 50%. A person legally appointed and authorized to hold assets in trust for another person is known as a fiduciary. The fiduciary manages the assets for the benefit of the other person rather than for his or her own profit. The fiduciary is expected to act in the best interests of the people whose assets they manage. An investment fund is a resource of capital belonging to numerous investors that is used to collectively purchase securities for the investors. Each investor retains ownership and control of his or her own shares. Individual investors don't make decisions about how the fund's money should be invested. Instead, a fund manager oversees the investments and decides which securities the fund should hold. Gross domestic product, or GDP, is the total market value of goods and services produced by both workers and capital in a country during a given period, which is usually 1 year. The GDP is considered the most fundamental measure of a nation's economy. The rise or fall of the GDP has major implications socially, economically, and politically. The term growth stock refers to shares in a company whose earnings are expected to grow at an above-average rate compared to the market as a whole. Growth stocks usually don't pay dividends. Any profits are reinvested in the company. A hedge fund is an aggressively managed portfolio of investments that uses advanced investment strategies with the goal of generating high returns. Hedge funds are usually set up as private partnerships open to a limited number of investors. They require very large initial minimum investments and often require investors keep their money in the fund for at least 1 year. Leverage is use of financial instruments or borrowed capital to increase the potential return of an investment. It's investing borrowed money as a way to enlarge potential gains, but at the risk of greater losses. If investors use leverage to make an investment and the market moves against them, their loss can be much greater than it would have been if the investment had not been leveraged. A company can use leverage to generate shareholder wealth, but if the strategy fails, shareholder value can be destroyed. Liabilities are any money or service that is currently owed to another party. Property taxes, for example, are a liability owed to the city or state. Other liabilities include loans, accounts payable, mortgages, deferred revenues, and other expenses. In a margin account, a brokerage lends a client cash to finance the purchase of securities. The loan is collateralized by the securities themselves and by cash. If the value of the securities drops sufficiently, the account holder will be required to deposit more cash or sell a portion of the stock. With a margin account, you are leveraging your holdings with your broker's money. Doing that can magnify both gains and losses. A margin call is a broker's demand for an investor to deposit additional money or securities so that the account is brought up to the minimum maintenance margin. You will receive a margin call if one or more of the securities you bought with the broker's money has decreased past a certain point. A money market is a market for short-term debt instruments. It is an area in which financial instruments with high liquidity and very short maturities are traded. Money markets are used for short-term borrowing and lending, from several days to just under a year. Money markets are usually seen as a safe place to put money because the investments have very short maturity dates. A mortgage is a debt secured by the collateral of real estate property. The borrower is obligated to pay back the debt with a predetermined number of payments. Mortgages are used to make large real estate purchases without paying the entire value of the purchase up front. Over a period of many years, the borrower repays the loan plus interest. At the end of this period, the borrower owns the property free and clear. If the borrower stops paying the mortgage, the lender can foreclose and take possession of the property. A mutual fund is an investment made up of a pool of money collected from many investors for the purpose of buying securities. Mutual funds, operated by money managers, attempt to produce capital income for the fund's investors. Mutual funds give small investors access to professionally managed investments that normally would not be available to people with only small amounts. Mutual funds group financial assets such as stocks, bonds, and cash equivalents, as well as their mutual exchange-traded and closed fund counterparts. Portfolios are held directly by investors and/or managed by financial professionals. A portfolio is a list of the investments held by an individual or a bank or other financial institution. An investment portfolio can be divided into segments representing a variety of assets that create a good balance of risk versus return. A recession occurs when there is significant decline in activity across the economy that lasts longer than a few months. The technical definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth, as expressed by the gross domestic product. Recessions generally last from 6 to 18 months. Interest rates usually fall as the government tries to stimulate the economy, making it easier to borrow money. A depression is a severe and prolonged downturn in economic activity. In economics, a depression is defined as an extreme recession that lasts 2 or more years. It is characterized by economic factors such as increases in unemployment, a drop in available credit, bankruptcies, and debt defaults. Consumer confidence and investments decrease, causing substantial parts of the economy to shut down. The Great Depression of 1929 to 1939 was the biggest and most disastrous in American history. Any person or institution that owns at least one share of a company's stock is a shareholder in that company. Shareholders are literally the company's owners. They have the potential to profit if the company does well, but they can also lose if the company does poorly. Shareholders can inspect the company's books and records and sue the company for poor management, and if the company liquidates, they have a right to a share of the proceeds. Shareholders also have a right to receive a portion of any dividends the company declares. Short selling is the sale of a security that is not actually owned by the seller, or that the seller has borrowed. Short selling is motivated by the belief that a security's price will decline, enabling it to be bought back at a lower price to make a profit. Short selling can be a form of speculation or a means of hedging the downside risk of an ownership position in the same security. A subprime mortgage is a loan granted to individuals with low scores who would not be able to qualify for conventional mortgages. Because subprime borrowers present a higher risk for lenders, subprime mortgages charge interest rates above the prime lending rate. In the early years of the 21st century, lenders sought additional profits through these higher risk loans and charged higher interest rates to compensate for the additional risk. As the frequency of subprime mortgage foreclosures rose, many of those lenders faced bankruptcy. A Treasury bill, or T-bill, is a short-term debt obligation backed by the U.S. government. It has a maturity of less than 1 year. T-bills are sold in denominations from $1,000 to $5 million and usually have maturities of 1, 3, or 6 months. T-bills are issued through a competitive bidding process at a discount from their face value. Unlike bonds, T-bills do not pay fixed amounts of interest. Instead, the appreciation of the Treasury bill provides return to the holder. A company can raise money by issuing either debt or stock. If the company has never before issued stock to the public, it begins with an initial public offering, or IPO. A venture capitalist is an investor who provides funds to start up ventures or support small companies that want to expand but don't have access to public funding through the stock market. Venture capitalists make these investments based on the possibility of massive returns if the companies succeed. Venture capitalists also experience major losses if their picks fail. Productivity is the measure of economic output compared to investment of labor and capital. Productivity gains are vital to an economy because they allow greater accomplishment with smaller input. Recent productivity gains have come mostly from technological advances, such as computers and online commerce. New words for the second edition. I have selected the following 10 words about money and finance that are newly emerging and most relevant in the 2020s. 1. A gig economy is an economic model characterized by short-term contracts or freelance work, known as gigs, often facilitated by digital platforms. 2. Cryptocurrency is a digital or virtual currency secured by cryptography, decentralized and often based on blockchain technology, which we'll soon be discussing. 3. An NFT, or non-fungible token, is a unique digital asset representing ownership of specific items or content, often used in art, collectibles, and gaming. 4. Web3 is the next evolution of the Internet, focused on decentralization and user sovereignty, potentially impacting finance and digital ownership. 5. Supply chain disruptions are interruptions in the production and distribution of goods and services caused by factors such as natural disasters or global events. The COVID pandemic created major supply chain disruptions. 6. Blockchain is a decentralized and distributed digital ledger technology used to securely record transactions across multiple computers. 7. Green finance is defined as financial products and investments aimed at promoting environmental sustainability and addressing climate change. 8. Fintech, or financial technology, is defined as innovations aimed at disrupting traditional financial methods through technology, such as mobile payments or robo-advisors, a form of AI that provides financial advice with little or no human intervention. 9. Microfinance is defined as financial services, such as small loans and savings accounts, provided to low-income individuals or communities who lack access to traditional banking. 10. ESG, or environmental, social, and governance investing, is a series of investment strategies that consider environmental, social, and governance factors alongside financial returns. To reinforce your understanding of these newly emerging words, here is a short story that makes use of all 10 of them. In the vibrant city of Lumina, where innovation thrived and possibilities seemed endless, Alex found himself navigating the tumultuous waters of the gig economy. Armed with a knack for digital design and a passion for creativity, Alex dove headfirst into freelance work, seeking opportunities in the ever-expanding realm of Web3 technologies. One day, while scrolling through the latest developments in cryptocurrency, Alex stumbled upon a groundbreaking project involving NFTs. Intrigued by the concept of owning digital art and collectibles on the blockchain, Alex decided to explore this new frontier, creating and selling unique NFTs inspired by the beauty of nature and the urgency of environmental conservation. However, just as Alex's NFT venture began to gain traction, Lumina was struck by a series of supply chain disruptions, sending shockwaves through the city's bustling economy. Undeterred, Alex recognized an opportunity to leverage blockchain technology to address these challenges, collaborating with local businesses to establish transparent and resilient supply chains powered by smart contracts. As Alex's endeavors in the gig economy flourished, he became increasingly passionate about the intersection of finance and sustainability. With a newfound focus on green finance and ESG principles, Alex embarked on a mission to promote environmental responsibility and social impact through his work. Through microfinance initiatives and partnerships with fintech companies, Alex sought to empower communities to build a more equitable and sustainable future for generations to come in the dynamic landscape of Lumina's ever-evolving economy. Now, following the 30-day program described in Chapter 2, please remember to go listen to your bonus review session for this chapter in the mornings and evenings on days 1, 2, and 3. Good luck. Chapter 4. Days 4, 5, and 6. The words you need to know to persuade others. Words are tools. Every word has a purpose, but you need to fulfill that purpose by putting the word to use. If a hammer is left lying in a drawer, the hammer is no different from any other object. It only fully becomes a hammer when it's used to drive in a nail. It's the same with words. They can all be useful, but they are useful for different things. Some are good for bringing people closer to you, and others tell people to leave you alone. Right now, we're going to look at a unique category of words and concepts. These are words for a very ambitious and challenging task. These are words of persuasion, which is the art and science of getting people to do what we want them to do. We've all met people who are very good at this, very persuasive people, and the advantages of being such a person are obvious. But can we learn to be persuasive? Can anybody develop that skill? One thing is certain. You can definitely learn to become more persuasive. That is exactly what we are going to accomplish in this session. And of course, we're going to do it by using vocabulary. We will identify words that are the tools of persuasion. We are going to see what they mean and learn how to use them persuasively. So let's get started. Our first word is confidence. But in terms of persuasion, confidence has a different meaning than you might expect. It's true that persuasive people need to believe in themselves. You cannot expect someone else to believe what you're saying if you don't completely believe it yourself. But that's not the meaning that I've got in mind here. It's not confidence in yourself. It's confidence in the other person. It is confidence in that person's willingness and ability to see the benefit you are communicating, and that it's not a benefit for you, it's a benefit for them. You need to believe that the person you are talking with will see the opportunity you're presenting or the problem you're solving. You have the confidence in them that once they see that, they'll behave accordingly. Our next word is acumen, a synonym for insight, and this too has a specific meaning in this context. We said a moment ago that you need confidence in people seeing the benefits you offer them. Well, there's another side to that coin. You also need to have acumen about people who simply cannot see or will not see. And people like that do exist, more of them than you might think. There are some people who think the world is flat. There are people who believe in the Easter Bunny. And there are certain people who really can't see where their real self-interest lies. Be insightful about those people. Don't spend a lot of time and effort on them. Here's the next word, ambience. It means atmosphere. It means context. As the saying goes, there's a time and a place for everything. When the time and the place are right, when the ambience is right, that's when persuasion can take place. You may have been the most persuasive person in the world, but if you were trying to sell deck chairs when the Titanic hit the iceberg, you would not get anywhere. On the other hand, if you were selling flotation devices, you probably could have done very well, even if you weren't an especially good persuader. Context can work both for you and against you. A persuasive person knows how to tell the difference. Allure is word number 4. Allure refers to the level of intense positive interest you are able to generate in another person. If you're not able to generate that energy, it may happen by some other means. We mentioned how being on the Titanic was a context that automatically generated interest. But most situations aren't as dramatic as that. And no one would cite being on the Titanic as an example of allure. Even if the context is positive, you still have to take advantage of that context. You have to generate interest within it. There are some very specific tools of doing that, and those are our next 3 words. Studies have shown that in a developed country like the United States, people's thoughts tend to focus on 3 broad topics. In other parts of the world, where physical survival is often an issue, people are thinking about core issues like finding food and escaping violence. But in America, most of us are fortunate enough not to be in that condition. So a large proportion of our thoughts concern the 3 topics of health, wealth, and love. But instead of health, let's use the word fettle. Instead of wealth, let's say plenitude. And instead of love, let's say concupiscence. Connecting to one or all of those topics is a key to generating interest in what you have to say. So let's look at them one by one. When we say someone is in, quote, fine fettle, end quote, that means they are in good health. But health is a quality whose meaning has hugely widened in recent years. At one time, it simply meant not being sick. If you were not sick, you were healthy. And during the years of major epidemics like polio and influenza, that narrow definition was good enough. But now health is seen as more than the mere absence of illness. It connects to lots of different lifestyle issues, like nutrition and exercise. The Apple wristwatch doesn't just tell the time, it also shows your blood pressure and heart rate. Those features connect with people's intense interest in health, and they help persuade people to buy the watch. What about plenitude? That's the next interest-building word. And as with health, its meaning is broader than it once was. Plenitude is abundance, but it encompasses more than money. There may have been a historical period in which just having enough money was satisfactory, but that's not the way things are now. Now we are the targets of sophisticated, intense marketing campaigns 24 hours a day. Money isn't just for paying the rent. Money is for buying the things we're conditioned to want. And since there are a lot of those things, we need a lot of money. We need a lot of money to attain plenitude. And in fact, most people think they're going to get it. 75% of Americans believe they're going to be rich at some point during their lives. So plenitude, money, wealth, abundance, and how to achieve it is always a good topic, especially when you persuade people that you can help them get it. Concupiscence is the third word that always sparks interest. It refers to desire, but of an especially vigorous kind. It's not high-minded spiritual yearning. It's got an earthly, aggressive component. Concupiscence even has a sexual connotation. It's a certain kind of energy that is always in the back of people's minds, and sometimes not only in the back. If you can connect to that energy in the people you meet, you can definitely make yourself a persuasive person. You might even become a movie star. Any discussion of the practical vocabulary of persuasion should start by giving credit to Robert Cialdini. While a professor of psychology and marketing at Arizona State University, he authored a book titled Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. The book has sold millions of copies, and it opened the door to the scientific study of persuasion, a field that had never really existed before. Anyone who is interested in this topic should read Robert Cialdini's book. As we discuss the vocabulary of persuasion, it's important to give credit to that groundbreaking work. In his research, Cialdini discovered that the first all-important tool of persuasion is reciprocity. Our next vocabulary word. That word describes a very simple psychological principle with regard to persuasion. If I do something for you, you will feel an obligation to do something for me. Suppose I own a bookstore, and I offer free cups of tea or coffee to anyone who comes in. Customers may feel obliged to buy something in my store. It's a very simple principle and a very persuasive one, too. Our next word is reiteration, which means repetition, saying something more than once. With regard to persuasion, reiteration means getting your message across clearly, concisely, and repeatedly. Few people are persuaded by anything that they hear only once. That doesn't mean you should nag anyone, but you do need to be creative about saying the same thing in several different ways. Be aware that a conversation that is very important to you might not be as important to the other party, at least not at first. Maybe they are not paying attention. It's nothing personal, that's just the way most conversations are. So reiterate, the verbal form, your message to get it across. A compliment can be a powerful tool for persuasion, but let's not restrict ourselves to one compliment. Let's offer a whole encomium, which is a more extended discourse of praise. It doesn't cost anything to generously praise another person. It doesn't take much time, and people really appreciate it, whether they say so directly or not. So, encomium is an important vocabulary word to keep in mind. It links back to reciprocity. People can respond to a compliment as if you've done something really nice for them, almost as if you've done them a favor. Therefore, they're more likely to feel a need to do something for you. Rectitude is our next word. It's almost synonymous with integrity, but with an overtone of strictness. When we spoke about confidence, we saw that it is something you feel about your listener. But rectitude is something a listener senses about you. Build and protect your good reputation very carefully and make sure it is reflected in the way you dress, the way you speak, and the people you associate with. Persuasion involves a large component of trust. Without trust, no one is going to be persuaded. Next, use the persuasive power of validation. For your listener, it answers the question, who says so besides you? People don't like to be the first customer in an empty restaurant. They like to see that plenty of other customers have chosen to dine there. They like to read good reviews of the restaurant by critics they trust. So validate yourself to anyone you're seeking to persuade. If that requires a little name dropping, go for it. Imminence is a word that refers to events in the very near future. Hence, it connotes an urgent time frame. There's a principle in business that every negotiation must have a time frame or expiration date, and it shouldn't be in the next millennium. It should be imminent. You're not going to be very persuasive if your listeners think there's no reason to act now. In all areas of life, people will use whatever time is allotted to them, or even a little more. So make use of a deadline. You don't need to instill panic, but you do need to create a sense of immediacy. Just as imminence implies limited time, paucity points to limited physical resources. When people are at the point of making a decision, hearing, quote, "there's only one left," end quote, can be very persuasive. Portrayal is an essential aspect of effective persuasion. It means the way things are made to appear. Two people can make exactly the same offer, but the one that's portrayed tastefully and impressively will be the most persuasive. That's why we get wrapping paper for gifts at Christmas or birthdays. Tie a red ribbon around your presentation, even if it's only an imaginary one. Perfect the impression you make. Master the art of portrayal. Learn to paint a picture for your listeners of the great benefit you're going to provide. Affinity can also be highly persuasive. We connect with people who are like us. What are your listeners interested in? How can you show that you share the same interest? Creating affinity doesn't mean you have to agree about everything. It just means you're sharing some of the same experiences. It's a way of forging a bond that can be very persuasive. Mental suppleness means flexibility of mind. You can adjust to different situations without losing your essential message. In terms of persuasion, suppleness means having more than one approach available. You're not going to be able to persuade everyone the same way, but almost everyone can be persuaded if you can flexibly adjust to their needs. Whenever you're called upon to be persuasive, you should energetically reconnoiter. In other words, you should do your research. You should scout out everything you can about your listeners. Careful reconnoitering allows for effective persuasion. In a business setting, you can find out everything you need to know about someone just by visiting LinkedIn or their company website. You are sure to find something you and your listener have in common. Use that information correctly, and you will seem like an old friend instead of a stranger. Energy is definitely important in persuasion, and it can be understood in two different ways. Some people radiate energy, and some people drain it away. Persuasive people know how to create and transfer their positive energy, even when there's not much energy coming from their listeners. This doesn't need to be complicated. It can mean eye contact, a sense of humor, or even just attentive listening. Ardor is very important. It means very determined energy. But being ardent, the adjectival form, isn't the same as being agitated. Persuasiveness also requires calm. But let's use a more poetic word. Let's call it placidity, which is internal peace. No one is persuasive when they're over the top emotional. Be emphatic, be eloquent, be engaging, but be in control. Be internally placid. That's the way to be persuasive. So far, we've been looking at words to describe what you are as a persuasive person. These are inner qualities that you need to have in yourself in order to persuade others. We've introduced quite a few words, so let me quickly review them now. Confidence, acumen, ambience, allure, fettle, plenitude, concupiscence, reciprocity, reiteration, encomium, rectitude, validation, eminence, paucity, portrayal, affinity, suppleness, reconnoiter, ardor, and placidity. Activate your persuasiveness. Now we are going to shift our emphasis. We're going to move from what you have to be to what you actually have to say. You are going to be a persuasive person, and here are 20 words you can use to activate your persuasiveness. The list begins with precipitous. It means sudden, startling, like falling off a cliff. It can have negative connotations, but it's also easy to use in a positive context, as in, quote, suddenly, precipitously, it all became clear, end quote. Forthwith is the next word. It's an old-fashioned word, but with a charmingly Shakespearean impact. Not later, not tomorrow, but now, forthwith. Expeditiousness is a word in the same category. So is celerity. These nouns are synonymous with quickness. Heralding means introducing, but with a persuasively theatrical sense of grandeur. It's a word that says, look at this. Heralding means that trumpets are blowing. It's useful for magnifying a product, a service, or an idea. It's the opposite of low-energy words like mentioning or remarking. You don't just tell someone about an upcoming event. You herald its arrival. Improve is a word everyone can connect with. It's persuasively optimistic. We all want to improve, and almost everyone believes improvement is possible. But why say improve when a beautiful word like ameliorate is available? Ameliorate is from a French root meaning to make better. If you were thinking about using the word improve, you can ameliorate that possibility by saying ameliorate instead. In the same way, imagine that you want to persuasively declare that something is very large. Would you say huge? Would you say gigantic? Those aren't very attention-getting words. A possibly better choice is Brobdingnagian, a word from Jonathan Swift's 18th century novel Gulliver's Travels. It refers to an imaginary race of giants. When your vocabulary shows that you're educated and well-read, you'll be much more persuasive. Prodigious is another word that means very large, but it doesn't usually refer to physical objects. You might not say that your house is prodigious, but you can persuasively state that you have a prodigious vocabulary. Instead of saying that something was surprising, say it was startling. Startling is a word that's not overused. It has a slightly literary or British flavor. It means to be shocked, but not in an unpleasant way, as in, quote, "You gave me quite a start," end quote. Magic and miracle are two old words that have become contemporary. These can be very persuasive words because they suggest a kind of childlike wonder. They are feel-good words. But if you really want to get people's attention about how magical something is, say it's thaumaturgical, which comes from Greek roots meaning making wonders, hence working magic. Quick is one of those words that sounds like what it means. It sounds like click, like an electronic device turning on or off. This word can be paired with another word for a 1-2 punch, quote, quick and easy, end quote. But expeditious and facile are much more persuasive. Onerous, which means burdensome, is a persuasive word because it's a good alternative to difficult. When you're trying to persuade someone to do something that might not be easy, you should certainly be honest. But difficult is not a very emphatic word. Choose onerous instead. It's much more persuasive. Strange as it seems, the word opportunity can be paired with the word challenge. And the word onerous can also be paired with fortuitous, lucky and good. People respond to the idea that something onerous can be a fortuity, noun form, in disguise, largely because very often it's true. Free is of course a hugely persuasive word. It's almost in a category by itself. When you say something is free, you get people's attention. But the attention isn't really on you. It's on whatever is free. As an alternative, you can say unrecompensed. Unremunerated might even be better. Or gratis. There are many different words that mean free, although not many things actually are. Congratulations is a word that often gets people's attention in a positive way. If that's the first thing you say to someone, you can be fairly certain that they're going to wonder, congratulations for what? One problem with congratulations is that it's often used as the opening for a hard sell. Lots of spam emails begin with, quote, congratulations, end quote, in the subject line. So say felicitations instead. There has rarely, if ever, been a spam message that began with felicitations. The word love can be a very persuasive part of your vocabulary, but you've got to be careful with love in conversations, just like in life. Don't use this word too often or too casually. Don't devalue it, especially since there are many other options. Fervor is one, with fervently as the adverb form. Instead of saying you love baseball, you can say that you feel fervently about it. Amity is a softer word for love. It's slightly stronger than friendship, connotating a general, warm, good feeling. Amorousness, on the other hand, is a powerful word. If you disclose amorous feelings to someone, you will sound very persuasive. Inspiring is to be filled with spirit. It means you've connected with something supernatural that gives you enhanced power. But it's a bit too spiritual if you want to persuade someone to act. The word animating is more action-oriented. If you saw a film that was inspiring, that doesn't mean you felt like jumping out of your seat. To convey that feeling, you should use a word like animating. Quirky is an informal word that might not seem persuasive, but it has a positive energy. It's a good word for describing something that's unusual in a light-hearted way. But suppose you want to describe something as different, but not connoting lightheartedness. You need to say it's idiosyncratic, it's diacritical, it's anomalous. All those words are good alternatives to quirky. We're nearing the end of our discussion of persuasive vocabulary. There are only a few more to go. Dream and imagine are persuasive words because they give people permission to let their thoughts go. Dream refers to more of an unconscious process. A dream is something that happens to you in either a sleeping or waking state. Imagine is more proactive. It refers to something you consciously generate. Imagination is a dream that you've put yourself in charge of creating. But once again, those are conventional words. You'll get more attention if you say caprice instead of dream, because caprice has a pleasant, whimsical air. If you're referring to an unrealistic dream that could lead someone astray, chimera is the best word, but figment will also do. If you want to refer to an unpleasant dream or a frightening one, the obvious word is nightmare, but you should say bogey instead. Now we've looked at 52 words of persuasive conversation and self-expression. But let's look at just one more. This bonus word is by far the most persuasive word of all. This word has to be used over and over again if you hope to persuade anyone. It's a word I've used quite a few times in this session, and if the session has been persuasive, I'm sure using that word has really helped. This supremely important and persuasive word is you. Not I, the writer, but you, the listener. That's whom people want to hear about, because nothing is as important to people as the people themselves. In any dialogue of persuasion, the word you should be used at least 3 times more often than I or me. If you're like most people, this won't happen by itself. It doesn't come naturally. But training yourself to say you instead of I is the biggest step you can take toward real persuasiveness. New words for the second edition. I have selected the following 10 words on the topic of persuading others that are newly emerging and most relevant in the 2020s. 1. Persuasynth is the use of synthesized or artificially generated content to persuade or influence others, often through advanced technologies like deep learning and AI-generated media. 2. Mimetic manipulation is the deliberate crafting and dissemination of persuasive memes, For a definition of meme, see Chapter 7, and viral content to shape public opinion or behavior. 3. Neuroenticement is the use of neuroscience principles to design persuasive messages that target specific cognitive processes and emotional triggers in the brain. 4. Persuasion mining is the process of analyzing large data sets, including social media activity and consumer behavior, to identify patterns and insights for more effective persuasion strategies. 5. Persuasive personalization is defined as tailoring persuasive messages and content to individual preferences, demographics, and psychographic profiles for maximum impact. 6. Social proofing is defined as leveraging social validation and peer influence to persuade others, often through the display of endorsements, testimonials, or user-generated content. 7. Persuasion engineering is the application of engineering principles to design and optimize persuasive systems, interfaces, and experiences, such as persuasive technology and behavioral interventions. 8. Micro-persuasion means the subtle and targeted use of persuasive techniques in brief or concise communications, such as microcopy, notifications, or short-form content. 9. Persuasive feedback loop means a continuous cycle of feedback and adaptation in persuasive interactions, where responses and outcomes are analyzed to refine and improve future persuasive efforts. 10. Emotive engineering means the systematic design of products, services, and experiences to evoke specific emotional responses and facilitate persuasion. To help you gain a better understanding of these newly emerging words, here is a short story that makes use of all 10 of these words. In the near-future city of Synthopolis, where technology and psychology intersected in mesmerizing ways, Stephanie was a persuasive engineer on the forefront of innovation. Armed with cutting-edge tools like persuasynth and mimetic manipulation algorithms, Stephanie had the job of crafting compelling narratives and experiences that captivated minds and influenced behaviors. One day, Stephanie was tasked with a project involving neuroenticement, where she used advanced neuroscience techniques to create immersive digital environments that stimulated the brain's reward centers. Through persuasion mining and persuasive personalization, Stephanie tailored these experiences to each individual's preferences and psychological triggers, maximizing their persuasive impact. As Stephanie delved deeper into her work, she uncovered the power of social proofing and micro-persuasion in shaping human behavior. By leveraging persuasive feedback loops and emotive engineering techniques, Stephanie created interactions that elicited strong emotional responses and reinforced desired behaviors, subtly nudging people toward specific actions or decisions. Despite the ethical implications of her work, Stephanie believed in the potential for positive change through responsible persuasion engineering, with a commitment to transparency and empathy. She sought to use her skills to create experiences that empowered individuals and enriched their lives, navigating the intricate balance between persuasion and manipulation, in the ever-evolving landscape of Synthopolis. Now, following the 30-day program described in Chapter 2, please go listen to the bonus review session for this chapter in the mornings and evenings on days 4, 5, and 6. Good luck. Chapter 5, Days 7, 8, and 9. The words you need to know about love and relationships. Welcome to Chapter 5. This may be the most challenging lesson in the audiobook because the words we'll look at here are meaningful both intellectually and emotionally. When we're engaged in romantic or family relationships, the words we use carry much weight. They are the same words people have used for hundreds of years, but it is not easy to say what they really mean. We'll try to change that in this lesson. Once again, I will slow down and give greater emphasis to each of the vocabulary words as I read them. After this session, I will cease reminding you about this and continue proceeding along with each following chapter using the same method. So let's get started. Love, perhaps the most complex word in our vocabulary, is a collection of powerful ideas that also make it a very versatile concept. We love our children, our faiths, our hometowns, as well as sunny days, lively music, and pizza. We show love in infinite ways. When we say love, a listener can have dozens of interpretations in mind. We feel love, but we can't always define it. It can be a matter of changing brain waves or a revelation of the depths of our souls. How can you use this most precious word with thoughtfulness and care so your listener can feel what you feel? Since love is so difficult to grasp, let's look instead at some words that may cast some light on its components. Attraction is an essential part of any relationship. But this word, too, may need sharper focus. Enticement, for example, is a particular kind of attraction that is calculated to gain attention. One person entices another. Endearment can be an element of attraction, but it is a chaste emotion. An alternative is enthrallment, which literally means to become someone's servant or slave. Thrall is a somewhat old-fashioned word for serf or slave. It's a powerful word. When you're so attracted to someone that you're enthralled, it means you've lost the power to resist. Attraction inspires emotional expectation, even if those expectations are wildly unrealistic in the heart of our listener. People are attracted because they envision certain things happening. In the first days of romance, we may expect a future of watching beautiful sunrises with our beloved, and we may have expectations of how our lives will change for the better. Two kinds of expectation need to be talked about. One is apprehension. It refers to expectations slightly or not so slightly tinged with worry. If you're apprehensive about a relationship, that doesn't mean you're terrified, but you're not completely at ease. The reverse of apprehension is presumption. Adjective form, presumptuous. You're very confident, perhaps overconfident. When people are attracted to each other, they may see only what they want to see. It's a great feeling for a while. Surprise is the flip side of expectation. Surprises in relationships can be horrible or amazing, but the fact that there are surprises shouldn't be surprising. When people first meet and are attracted to each other, there can be a sense of incredulity. It seems incredible that you lived without this person for as long as you did. Sometimes later, there's incredulity that you lived with this person for as long as you did. Weren't there signs, portents, auguries? In modern parlance, all those poetic words are now subsumed into a less obscure terminology. Weren't there any red flags? Affection is the expression of attraction with kindness and without expectation of reciprocity. It's an expression of solicitude. That means giving solace, which is comfort. Affection can be very hard to find, much harder than sexual attraction. It comes from our most sincere and open-hearted and unguarded feelings, but doesn't demand necessarily anything from the recipient. Can we show honest affection, which draws our listener into our emotional space to create a bond, giving us a chance to fully impart our feelings? The word commitment is loaded with expectations. You can commit to another person, but do so with understanding that the other person will at times get on your nerves. So your real commitment should be to sustaining the relationship with the other person, unless and until that becomes impossible. You can commit to a vocation, a way of life, an idea. How are you committing to your listeners? How are you committing yourself in all your relationships? How do you sustain yourself when the relationship hits bumps in the road? An interesting variation on the word commitment is devoir, derived from the French word for duty. When you make an emotional commitment, you take on an obligation. Often people take on an obligation for everything they have in their spiritual bank account, and it can be a great feeling to do that. And sometimes people take on obligations for more than they have. In the early stages of attraction, you can feel besotted. That means drunk. You feel only the initial rush. There is no keeping score. However, that infatuation cannot be maintained indefinitely. Power dynamics are an inherent part of any interaction between two people. As they grow, every aspect of their lives, whether financial, emotional, or even our daily routines, eventually gets negotiated, mediated, and finally adjudicated, which means resolved, often in a legal context. How much are you willing to put on the table in those negotiations? To what extent can you expect to change someone's long-established habits, and how much can you change your own? You may be relatively relaxed about clutter, but your partner may prefer a streamlined living space and take time each day to tidy up. Will this imbue a feeling of reciprocity on your part to help clean up? Or will you do something your mate prefers not to do, like pick up the groceries? Some habits, like forgetting to put away sandwich fixings or squeezing the toothpaste tube from the middle, are hardly commitment shattering. Any relationship depends not only on compromise, but on conciliation. That's a word that means putting distrust aside. It means removing emotional obstacles so you can really be together. Compromise and conciliation, in turn, depend on insight and wisdom, two extremely valuable traits and two very important words. Insight requires discernment, the ability to see what people are really like rather than what you hope or fear. Wisdom is a larger form of insight, understanding the world in general. A synonym for wisdom is sapience, as in Homo sapiens, the scientific term for human being, which in Latin means wise human. Honesty is a quality that virtually everyone looks for in a close relationship. But how closely do we really want to look? Quote, "Do I look fat in this dress?" is a frequently asked question, both in stand-up comedy routines and in real life. Is an honest answer the right answer? Or is it human nature to keep some truths secret? Is veracity the right answer, meaning absolute, verifiable truth? Or should prudence be our guide? Prudence means taking care to avoid injury. It can be prudent to keep some things secret. Secrets may be a necessary evil, or maybe they are just necessary, and we can leave the evil tag out. Most of us make grave mistakes at some point in our lives. Some of us have been victims of misfortune that we would just as soon forget. Should there be secrets in an intimate relationship? Does intimate relationship imply full disclosure? Or can some things be sequestered, which means kept separate and hidden? The answer is usually a combination of your own system of values and negotiations with your partner. Even the best kept secrets can be exposed to the light under surprising circumstances. If they are very surprising, what's the right way to respond? Flexibility is a trait that allows us to adjust to life's vagaries and vicissitudes, words that mean erratic happenings and constant changes, respectively. It also helps us preserve what is positive even in negative situations. People like to make promises in relationships, especially at the beginning. Promises can be exciting and uplifting. Pledging love and fidelity can also be a way of simplifying things. Now you don't have to worry about looking for a better deal somewhere else, because you're going to be with this person forever. On the other hand, keeping promises can become more complicated as things change and time passes. It's not that making promises is a bad thing. It's just that once you make one in a relationship, you're supposed to live up to it, maybe forever. It's what Robert Frost had in mind when he wrote, quote, "But I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep," end quote. A word related to promise making is asseveration. It means to strongly and emphatically assert something. A related word is averment, meaning to state that something is true. There's no reason why you can't have an asseveration without an averment, or the other way around. Arguments in relationships are probably inevitable, but to understand what they are, we should see the differences between arguments and fights. Some arguments are little more than colloquies, meaning serious but cordial discussions. There can be a kerfuffle, which is much ado about nothing. Or there might be a full-fledged Brannigan, which is a verbal free-for-all, although it sometimes can refer to a drunken spree. Most arguments are emotional and sometimes heated dialogues in which the purpose is getting the other person to agree with you, or maybe to do something, whether they agree with you or not. But in a fight, the focus often shifts away from the actual issue at hand. The focus becomes hurting the other person, lacerating them, which means cutting in both a literal and figurative sense. It's the difference between tennis and mixed martial arts. In tennis, you're trying to hit the ball hard. In martial arts, you're trying to hit the other person as hard as you can. Arguments are bound to happen, so have at it. Just don't get angry. Permanence means unchanging forever. But is anything unchanging forever? In a close relationship, is anything unchanging for even a day or a minute? Not according to physics, and not according to psychology either. So how can we commit to a permanent relationship when relationships are infinitely mutable, meaning they are always in flux? Here's one idea. Instead of saying, I commit to this permanent relationship, try saying, I permanently commit to this relationship, which I know is going to evolve. The permanence is in your commitment, which is all you can control. Values is a useful word that can clarify what we can accept and what we can't. Scruple is a related word, referring to an ethical consideration that may inhibit action. If you have a scruple or scruples about something, it means you have difficulty accepting it from a moral point of view. The point has often been made that in a relationship, people can disagree on specifics as long as they agree on deeper values. I may want a Volvo and you may want an Audi, but we both agree that we want a safe, family-oriented car. That's our common value. But if you want an Audi and I want a motorcycle, we have different values. We have a bigger concern than who's going to install the car seat. Fidelity means being faithful in a relationship. Constancy is another word for this. It means that something in you always stays the same, even if everything outside of you doesn't. For a long time, it was clear what constancy meant in a marriage. Most importantly, it meant that there would be no action, gesture, or interest toward any other potential love object but the spouse. Today, we're living in a time when people are designing relationships for themselves that are outside the traditional boundaries. Whatever kind of relationship you choose, fidelity and constancy with that choice are essential. Religion can be a unifying or a divisive influence in a relationship. Participating in the ceremonies of an organized religion can be a positive shared experience for a couple or a family. Other people may want to express religious or spiritual beliefs individually, or maybe not at all. Some people are sacerdotal, which means they act like priests, and others are heretical, acting and believing in ways opposed to traditional dogmas and doctrines. In any case, religion is a major presence in American society. It affects all sorts of social issues, even the most personal ones in a marriage or partnership. Like it or not, we all have to decide what part religion will play in our lives. Acting on that decision will take some effort, because we live in an environment where there are many fundamentalist religious people, as well as many fundamentalist atheists. We will take up the subject of religion in more detail in Chapter 8. When we speak about relationships today, the correct words to use aren't always obvious. Spouse is no longer the default term for someone in a couple, or a dyad, which is what anthropologists call a pair of human beings who have made some commitment to each other. Spouse implies marriage. Many couples aren't married, and that number is growing. Partner is an alternative, bland but safe. How do couples designate themselves? Spouses, partners, or even soulmates, loosely referring to a partner who appears to be destined for or uniquely suited to another. In essence, we're talking about two people. Maybe that's all we need to know. Family is another word that we can no longer be sure about. It used to mean mom, dad, and children, usually biological children. Those relationships were consanguineous, based on common ancestry and descent. Now the word family can refer to many different configurations. Some people speak of quote, alternative families, end quote, while others feel that sounds too much like an apology. So a family today means a group of one or more people who call themselves a family. Nothing more and nothing less. Can we make a distinction between family and friends? People will say, he or she is part of the family, meaning that the relationship approaches the closeness of biological kinship. On a day-to-day level, integrating friends from two sides of one couple can be delicate, but usually turns out for the best. If two people are really close, it's unlikely their cohort, their peer group of friends, would be completely incompatible. If they are, maybe the two people aren't really as close as they thought they were. Here's another pair of words that need to be differentiated: happiness and cheerfulness. Happiness, like fidelity, is a state of being that we strive for. Quote, the pursuit of happiness, end quote, is mentioned as a fundamental human right by the Declaration of Independence. But it's easy to confuse happiness with pleasure. According to the ancient philosopher Aristotle, the pursuit of true happiness is the essence of virtue. The pursuit of pleasure for its own sake is called hedonism. The Declaration of Independence did not say, quote, life, liberty, and the pursuit of pleasure, end quote. And you can see how different that sounds. We're not born with an inalienable right to fishing trips or manicures. Pleasure has its place in relationships and in life, but its place can't be everywhere. Cheerfulness, like loyalty, is a way we act. Another word for cheerfulness is risibility, which means readiness to laugh. We might expect to act cheerful when we feel happy, but for the good of a relationship, maybe it's the time to be cheerful when we don't feel happy. Confucius said that the most important thing in life is the expression on your face. It indicates where you are right now in your life's journey, not only where you are, but where you choose to be. Humor, which is the essential element in both happiness and cheerfulness, is a quality that everyone desires in a relationship. Nobody wants to be with a person who hasn't got a good sense of humor. A sourpuss, a dour personality. But here's something funny. Everybody does have a great sense of humor, at least in their own opinion. That's just a fact about how people feel about themselves. It's the one area where everybody feels outstanding. Like Lake Wobegon, the fictitious Midwestern town in Garrison Keillor's long-lived radio show, where every child is above average. Although everybody wants a partner with a good sense of humor, that shouldn't be hard to find, because everybody is sure they have one. That's pretty funny. What about joy and fun? Those are two more words whose meanings might seem identical, but they're not really the same in a relationship. Joy is yet another word that has a slightly religious or ecclesiastical overtone. The Christmas carol is called Joy to the World, not Fun to the World. See the difference? Joy is a bit high-minded and exalted compared to fun, which implies light-hearted, unserious enjoyment. You can experience joy watching your child in a school play, which can also be fun. But a weekend in Vegas isn't usually described as joyous. Both joy and fun are important to a relationship, although you can't necessarily expect to find them both in the same place. Sex and finances are another pair of words to consider. They can be resources for both joy and fun, and they're also the two main reasons that relationships break up. Give some thought to why that's true. Think of differences and similarities between sex and money. They should probably be approached with great care, although reckless abandon, insouciance, can be very attractive sometimes. Are these private issues, or should we be much more open about them? Try to come up with some firm answers for yourself. Sacrifice might seem like an odd word to associate with relationships, but sacrifice is definitely what relationships demand. If you're going to be with someone else, there's no way life can be all about you anymore, especially when children are brought into the mix. But moving away from pure self-centeredness can be a relief. Total self-absorption, psychiatrists call it narcissism, can be a burden. Another word for extreme egocentrism is solipsism. Most people want to live for something bigger than themselves. In fact, many people need to do that. It's probably ingrained in our genetic makeup as human beings. So the sacrifices you make for a relationship aren't against your nature. They are what you are meant to be doing. As the film Parenthood so eloquently put it, this will be a ride on a roller coaster, not a merry-go-round. It will include two heavy words, triumph and tragedy. Two people will experience both of those if they stay together long enough. You're probably familiar with words of the traditional marriage ceremony, the nuptial vows. Quote, "In sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer." End quote. Notice that it doesn't say or, it says and. In sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer. Once again, it's not a merry-go-round, it's a roller coaster. Triumph and tragedy. If you buy the ticket, you take the ride. When you take that ride, you'll learn about pliancy, plasticity, and pliability. They all mean more or less the same thing, adaptability. A related concept is resilience. The literal meaning of the Latin roots of this word, resilience, is to jump back. Research has shown that this is one of the most widely shared traits among successful individuals. It's definitely a basic quality of successful relationships. But resilience is not an end in itself. The purpose of resilience is revivification. That means being reborn. In Buddhist spirituality, there's a principle called beginner's mind. It's the ability to look at things as if you're seeing them for the first time, no matter what has come before. For most people, this doesn't happen by itself. It's not natural because first you have to erase the past in order to see the present with fresh eyes. Unlearning has to precede learning. Respect is something else you'll learn. When you're looking at something from the outside, it can seem a lot easier than it is. Olympic figure skaters have to keep smiling the whole time they're on the ice. They have to look as if they're out there just having a good time, which is the most difficult part of the performance. Actually, they are having a good time, but that doesn't mean it's easy, and their accomplishment deserves respect. Septuagenarians and octogenarians are people in their 70s and 80s, respectively. If they have been married for 50 years and raised a family, they deserve respect too, because that's a lot harder than figure skating. People who are just starting on that path also deserve respect. Figure skating in the Olympics is very challenging, but maybe not as much as when you step out on the ice for the first time. Appreciation may be even more important than respect. Respect is something you feel, but appreciation is something you show. If a relationship ends and the people look back on what caused the breakup, one of the most frequently heard comments is this: I should have shown more appreciation. That's an example of regret, an experience that no one likes to have, but is probably impossible to avoid. Everything in life is a choice. We can't go left and right at the same time. We may have to choose one relationship over another, and there may naturally be moments when we'll feel regret. That's our existential predicament, meaning that it's built into who and what we are. It comes with the territory. The number one source of regret is getting angry. Anger can be compelling and seductive. Sometimes it can seem irresistible. It's like a beautiful piece of chocolate cake. You just can't resist taking a bite out of it. But once you take a bite, you won't be able to stop. A choleric individual is someone who is angry practically all the time, and there are a lot of such people around. But remember, you will regret your anger later on. Forgiveness is the better choice, but it's not easy. If anger is like chocolate cake, forgiveness is like something that's really good for you, but it doesn't give the same instant sugar high. The good news is that as time goes on, making the correct choice gets easier. You don't have to feel like you are right all the time. You may still feel vituperative, prone to verbal abuse, but you don't need to feel vindicated, that is, justified. Or even if you do, you're able to keep it to yourself. We have only 3 words left in this session on the vocabulary of relationships. As we've seen several times in this chapter, 2 words can mean almost the same thing. The difference between them is a matter of degree. That's how it is with hope and faith, both of which are important in enduring relationships. Every emotional relationship, and certainly every marriage, begins with hope, which we can define as a feeling of optimism with some basis in fact. A couple may want to buy a beautiful home, for example. They can feel hopeful, sanguine about that, if they have a source of income that will allow them to pay for the home. If they don't have a source of income, they can still look forward to living in the home. But then it's a matter of faith rather than hope. Faith doesn't need any material basis. In fact, if there is a material basis, it's not faith, it's hope. But both hope and faith are important words and essential elements in a sustainable relationship. So what should we have faith in? What can we realistically hope for in our relationships? Given the millions of people who are trying to build lives together, the answers will have to be vague. Not everyone wants the same results, and many people want opposite results. Some people get what they want, others don't. But when people stay together for a long time, not because they have to, but because they want to, they seem to achieve a state of being that we can call imperturbability. Imperturbability means calm. It means peace. It means that you won't allow yourself to be disturbed. And that achievement should be taken very seriously. The concept occurs in the preamble to the United States Constitution, although in a slightly different terminology. Quote, domestic tranquility, end quote, is identified as one of the basic goals of the nation. What does domestic tranquility mean? It means a peaceful home, nothing more and nothing less, although in the Constitution it refers to tranquility within the nation as a whole. New words for the second edition. I have selected 10 newly emerging words that reflect evolving trends and dynamics in modern love and relationships, influenced by technology, cultural shifts, and changing societal norms in the 2020s. 1. Flirtationship means a relationship that is characterized by flirting and romantic tension, but may not necessarily progress into a committed relationship. 2. Textlationship means a relationship primarily conducted through text messages or online communication. 3. Slow love means a deliberate approach to building romantic connections, prioritizing emotional intimacy and communication over quick physical involvement. 4. Amorability means the capacity to love and be loved, one's ability to form healthy and fulfilling relationships. 5. Love language means a person's preferred way of giving and receiving love, as identified in Gary Chapman's theory of the 5 love languages: words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. 6. Swipe culture refers to the prevalence of dating apps and the act of swiping through potential matches based on brief profiles and photos. 7. Polyamory means the practice of engaging in consensual romantic relationships with multiple partners simultaneously, with the knowledge and consent of all parties involved. 8. Ghosting means the sudden and unexplained cessation of communication from one party in a relationship, leaving the other person feeling confused and abandoned. 9. Love bombing means an intense and overwhelming display of affection or attention from one person to another in the early stages of a relationship, often used to manipulate or control the other person. 10. Deep like means a level of interest or attraction that is more than a casual crush, but less intense than love. Now, to gain a better understanding of these newly emerging words, here is a short story that makes use of all 10 of these words. In the bustling city of serendipity, where connections were made in the blink of an eye and lost just as quickly, Ethan and Maya found themselves entangled in the complexities of modern love. What started as a casual flirtationship blossomed into a textlationship filled with late-night conversations and heartfelt confessions. Despite the fast-paced nature of swipe culture that surrounded them, Ethan and Maya chose to embrace the beauty of slow love. They savored each moment, taking the time to truly understand one another's amorability and appreciate the intricacies of their love language. As their bond deepened, Ethan and Maya explored the complexities of polyamory, navigating the waters of multiple connections with honesty and respect. But just as they thought they had found their happily ever after, Ethan was suddenly ghosted by Maya, leaving him heartbroken and bewildered by her sudden disappearance. Unbeknownst to Ethan, Maya had fallen victim to love bombing from another suitor, swept away by grand gestures and empty promises. In the end, it was Ethan's deep like and unwavering patience that brought Maya back to him, reminding her that true love was worth waiting for, even in a world consumed by fleeting connections. Now, following the 30-day program described in Chapter 2, please go listen to the bonus review session for this chapter in the mornings and evenings on days 7, 8, and 9. Good luck. Chapter 6, Days 10, 11, and 12. The words you need to know about ecology and nature. Of all the issues now confronting the world, humanity's relationship with the natural environment is the most challenging. Like other areas of great concern, this topic has its own dynamic vocabulary, which is changing every day. In this chapter, we will discuss some foundational words related to ecology and nature. Some of these words have been part of the scientific dialogue for decades. Others are new terms that connect with the most recent developments. As recently as the late 1970s, national publications were carrying articles about the coming of a new ice age. It was a novel idea, but in a time of gas rationing in the U.S. and hostage-taking in Iran, no one was urgently worried about new herds of woolly mammoths. Now, 50 years later, we still have energy problems and hostage takings, and we have real concerns about the future of the planet, often seen in terms of global warming. Although there is controversy about what exactly is happening, something is definitely going on, and worldwide. 2023 was the warmest in human history. The words in this chapter reflect the provide a coherent explanation of concerns. You will get a glimpse of the major problems are being put into words. So here we go. The word ecology can add sophistication to a conversation, but you must be careful of the context, or you can confuse or alienate the listener. Generally, ecology refers to the study of interactions of living organisms with one another. Another use of ecology is the examination of the physical environment, or the branch of biology that deals with the relation of organisms to one another and their physical surroundings. More loosely, ecology and its adjectival form, ecological, can also be used to characterize the political movement that seeks to protect the environment from damage from a number of sources. Unless you want the discussion to be unnecessarily contentious, make certain you and your listener have the same starting point in the conversation. A habitat is a place where a particular population of a species lives. A habitat can be natural, such as the woods, or artificial, like a zoo. Habitat can also be applied to a structure that affords a controlled environment for living in extremely inhospitable locations, such as an underwater research laboratory. As with ecology, habitat can also be used to describe aspects of human life, such as describing where a person can normally be found. Anthropogenic means originating with or caused by humans. Species do not live in isolation and must often share their habitat with other species in the colony or territory. This is called community. With this community, one must distinguish the usage as related to nature and biology as opposed to human contexts, such as feelings of fellowship or sharing common attitudes or associations. Always keep multiple uses of words in mind so the word both suits the conversation and speaks directly to the listener. An aquifer is an underground layer of rock and sand that naturally stores water and transmits it to wells and springs. Water from this source, called groundwater, can be used for drinking or other purposes. Hydrosphere refers to the totality of water on the planet in all forms. This includes all liquid water on Earth, such as rivers, lakes, and oceans, all frozen waters, such as glaciers, icebergs, and polar ice caps, and all water vapor. The cryosphere is the sum total of Earth's fresh water supply that is locked up in frozen forms, including polar ice, mountain glaciers, permafrost, and snow. An ecosystem is a community which includes the physical aspects of habitat, soil, air, water, weather, and environs interacting as a system. Ecosystems can be delicate or hardy, depending on the conditions. The introduction of new species or changes in climate can damage an ecosystem. Abiotic is an advanced vocabulary word describing non-living chemical and physical aspects of a habitat, such as soil, sunlight, water, wind, and humidity. Although these elements are not, strictly speaking, alive, they do affect living organisms and the functioning of ecosystems. The opposite term, biotic, refers to the living organisms of a habitat, such as plants and animals. Climate change refers to long-term changes in weather patterns that can express themselves in a number of ways. These include a rise in global temperatures, changes in rainfall patterns resulting in floods and droughts, and melting polar ice, which raises sea levels. Most sources hold that these long-term effects are leading to an overall increase in surface temperatures on the Earth, which is called global warming. Climate change can be caused both by natural forces and by human activities. It's not always clear what the cause really is or how these two causes interact with each other. Carbon footprint is a measure of the effect that human activities have on the climate in terms of carbon dioxide emissions. Carbon dioxide is a colorless atmospheric gas whose chemical formula is CO2, indicating that its molecule consists of one carbon atom, whose chemical abbreviation is C, and two oxygen atoms, chemical abbreviation O. It is emitted during respiration by plants and by all animals, fungi, and microorganisms that depend either directly or indirectly on plants for food. CO2 is also generated as a byproduct of the burning of fossil fuels or vegetable matter. CO2 is absorbed from the air by plants during their growth. It's one of the greenhouse gases, which are gases that trap the heat of the sun in the Earth's atmosphere, producing the so-called greenhouse effect. The result is an increase in the temperature of the Earth's surface. That in turn can bring about potentially disastrous results, such as the melting of polar ice. The global carbon cycle is the cyclical movement of carbon within the biosphere. Carbon is primarily removed from air by plants and by dissolution in bodies of water. Carbon is generally returned to the air through biological respiration, decomposition of organic matter, volcanic activity, and human industrial activities, including the burning of fossil fuels. A carbon sink is a place where carbon accumulates and is stored. Plants and trees are carbon sinks. They accumulate carbon dioxide during the process of photosynthesis and store it in their tissues as carbohydrates and other organic compounds. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to produce their food. A carbon source is a place where carbon is produced or released. In addition to being carbon sinks, plants can also be carbon sources. They release carbon in the form of carbon dioxide when their tissues are broken down. Cars also release carbon dioxide when they burn gasoline, and power plants release carbon dioxide when they burn fossil fuels to generate electricity. Fossil fuels are formed in the ground from the remains of dead plants and animals that lived millions of years ago. Oil, natural gas, and coal are all fossil fuels. They are not renewable resources. Once consumed, they are gone forever. When burned, they are a major cause of greenhouse gases and global warming. Methane is an odorless, colorless, flammable gas formed when organic matter decomposes. It is one of the most prevalent greenhouse gases. More than 80% of methane comes from human activities, such as burning fossil fuels. Deforestation is the destruction of forests, usually in order to open land for agriculture or industry. Cutting down trees, which provide oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide, is understood to increase the greenhouse effect. Deforestation also destroys animal habitats. Desertification is a change from once fertile land into a desert as a result of a variety of factors. These include natural climatic variations, as well as human activities, such as overgrazing by livestock animals, deforestation, and poor irrigation practices. Wetlands are areas of marshy or swampy ground, or any land area that tends to be regularly wet or flooded. Wetlands are among the most fertile natural ecosystems in the world. They host plants, birds, and animals that are specially adapted to life in very wet conditions.